Hello.
Hello. Good morning, Kehinde.
Morning. How are you doing, John?
All right, thank you. And yourself?
Always good. Thank you.
Awesome. We're waiting for the other panelists to join us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Simon.
Hey, Kenny. How are you?
Good.
Nice to see you.
Same here.
Hi, Jean-Philippe.
I'm okay, Simon. Thank you. And yourself?
It's very early in the morning here.
Did you finally get the result for the American election?
No, I've been watching it and there's no result yet, but it is looking like Trump's going to win at the moment.
Oh, okay. Well, we're waiting for another panelist. I think we're waiting for Mr. Bokarsi, the CEO of the Senegalese Housing Bank, and our moderator, Olivier Vidal. Let me just see if my screen sharing works.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I apologize for being late. We are wrapping up the session before on Diaspora investment as well, so very relevant to what we will discuss now. All the participants are joining, so let's give them 5 more seconds. I hope you are all well. Yes, very well, Kehinde. Thank you so much for joining us. Jean-Philippe, how are you?
I'm okay, thank you, Olivier. Very happy to be here.
Simon, good very early morning. Thank you so much for joining us from Washington.
Not at all, my pleasure.
I understand it's a very normal day for you in America at the moment, right?
There's something on the news, but I've not followed it.
Yeah, me neither. So Bokarsi is actually going to join us. He's logging in any second, so we'll have a full room today and great conversation. Really looking forward to it. I'm just going to introduce quickly the session, how we're going to work today. So we have 60 minutes. We're going to kick off with a presentation from Jean-Philippe, who works with the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa, my colleague, and who is going to give us a bit of an overview of the Diaspora bond, like as an instrument to raise a long-term capital, and how they have been used throughout the world, and the opportunities and challenges in Africa, because we are looking at it from a research perspective and a project perspective at CAF. This is something that we started to, so it's really the early part of the process. So it's just to share our initial thoughts and findings, and to kick off this conversation. Then Bokar, Kehinde, and Simon will just have a conversation, perhaps react to Jean-Philippe's presentation, but also to share your thoughts and your view on this tool, right? That is, I would say, not as straightforward when we talk about diaspora investment and leveraging the remittances flow and the money that is available in diaspora to invest in the continent. Diaspora bonds are a bit different because they are an investment instrument, right, in a way. So the process also to make it attractive to make it attractive to the diaspora is a bit different than having them invest directly into housing back home, which they do, as we know. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. I invite the participant to post their question on the chat session, And I will, depending on how the conversation goes, I will either stop from time to time and ask the question to the relevant speakers, or we'll just keep the question to the end. And hopefully we should have at least 10-15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So without further ado, Jean-Philippe, I hand over the mic to you. I think you have slides, right? So if you want to share your screen.
Yes, I do,
Okay.
I do have slide Olivier. So I am going to share my screen with the panelists and the whole audience.
Excellent. And if I can just ask Kehinde and Simon in the meantime to just mute your mic. And Jean-Philippe, if you can put your presentation on full screen, please.
Okay, not a problem. On full screen. Is it better now?
No, yes, put slideshow perhaps, because now we see the next slide.
Is it better now? Can
Yes,
you see
perfect, perfect. Thank you. The floor is yours, Jean-Philippe.
Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you. So good morning again, everybody. My name is Jean-Philippe Adot, and I am a research manager here at CAF. I'm mostly responsible for the research and study that we produce here and that covers the West and North African region. And today it is my pleasure to actually discuss with you our preliminary findings on diaspora bonds in Africa. The objective of the study is actually threefold. The first one is to assess some of the existing diaspora bonds and to also understand the structure and their contribution in terms of housing finance. The second objective is to assess the viability and the replicability of diaspora bonds in Africa. And the last objective is actually to offer some recommendation drawn from previous diaspora bonds issuer, and especially based on the recent experience from the Senegalese Housing Bank. To give you a bit of context, why is exactly diaspora bond pertinent? Why is it relevant to actually talk about it? Well, we all aware that there is a very important housing backlog in Africa. We're talking about over 50 million units. But unfortunately, the level of investment that goes into the real estate sector is not able to actually meet the demand, to be able to accommodate or to adequately house the African population. It is estimated that the infrastructure investment represents 135 billion per year, with a financial gap of about 60 billion per year in Africa. And I previously said that the level of investment was not enough. Well, to give you a bit of statistic, it is estimated that the investment that goes into the real estate sector only represents 3% of the investment that's actually made in other sectors, such as transport and energy, where you can see that the total investment or the total percentage represent 40 and 39%. Another reason why diaspora bond is very important is because of the size of the African diaspora. Currently, it is estimated at over 145 million, and the African diaspora has become more one of the most important players in sustaining the African economy. In 2019, the remittances inflow to low to middle income countries were expected to reach 551 billion. Another reason why diaspora bond is very important is because of remittances, as I said. And as you can see in the figures here on the right-hand side of the screen, the trend when it comes to remittances is pretty stable. Unlike when it comes to foreign direct investment, you can see that it is not that stable. And based on various elements that actually belong to the specific macroeconomic sector of every African country, you may see the amount of foreign direct investment increasing or decreasing over the past 20 years. So to give you a bit of important facts about diaspora bond, you need to understand that as the name itself, diaspora bond is a bond. And it is a debt security instrument with an original maturity of more than 1 year, which is usually tradable in the financial market. But diaspora bond is very different from the regular bond that you can find in the market. And I wanted to highlight two important features here. The one important is actually called patriotic discount. And what is a patriotic discount? A patriotic discount simply said, or simply put, refer to an interest rate that is actually lower than the benchmark. Usually or typically, it is actually compared against the 10-year US Treasury bond or other bonds floated by the same or comparable issuer. And to also give you a bit of example, in the first 40 years of the Israeli diaspora bond, the interest rate that was offered on the Israeli diaspora bond was 4%, unlike the US Treasury bond that was offering 6.8%. This is actually to tell you that there was a gap of more than 2%, but that was not a threat or a challenge in terms of subscription rate, because the Israeli diaspora bond is up to now one of the most successful diaspora bonds in the market. Another important features that you need to understand when talking about diaspora bond is that it is usually used to finance projects for public sector or large infrastructure development, or even to support the issuing country in time of crisis. So it means that diaspora bond is actually seldomly used by the private sector. It is mostly used by government and state-owned entity. The private sector seldomly rely on diaspora bond, although you may have some exception. For instance, you are the private company in Germany that actually issued a diaspora bond tapping into the wealth of the German diaspora living in the Gulf Cooperation Council. That being said, what are the main characteristics and the types of diaspora bond that you can actually find in the market? And the characteristics that I'm currently showing with you are actually coming from the most successful diaspora bond in the world, named the Israeli diaspora bond and the Indian diaspora bond. So on the left inside of the screen, the characteristics that you're currently seeing are actually the main characteristic of the Israeli diaspora bond. You can see that it has annual issuance, it has SEC registration, it is non-negotiable, it has a fixed rate bond, and it was actually open to national and international diaspora. Unlike the characteristic of the Indian diaspora bond, as you can see, it was an opportunistic issuance. And simply put, what is an opportunistic issuance? An opportunistic issuance means that you do not issue your diaspora bond every year. You only issue your diaspora bond whenever there is a very important need to do so. Another important element of the Indian diaspora bond was that it was not registered, it was not SEC registered. And what does it mean? It simply means that the Indian diaspora bond could not actually tap into the market of retail investor in the United States. And this is a very important criteria to actually consider when thinking of issuing a diaspora bond. It was also a floating rate, 5 years bullet maturity, and restricted to the national diaspora, unlike the Israeli diaspora bond that was actually open to Israeli diaspora, but also international diaspora. So to give you a bit of example, I was talking about the most successful diaspora bond, the Israeli one and the Indian one. So Israel has been issuing diaspora bonds since 1951 and up to now. And they've been successful in actually raising over $25 billion in the past 50 years. The Indian diaspora bond was only issued 3 times, in 1991, 1998, and 2000 through the government State Bank of India. And the country actually has been successful in raising over $10 billion. And you also had Sri Lanka, which issued a diaspora bond through the Sri Lanka Development Bond in 2001 and has actually raised $580 million. Fortunately, we do have also African country that played an important role in the diaspora bond market. And the pioneer in the diaspora bond market is actually Ethiopia. Ethiopia, which happened to issue 2 diaspora bonds, one in 2008 to actually help the country finance the hydro electricity power plant that they wanted to build. And in 2011, when they wanted to also build the Renaissance Dam. Aside Ethiopia, you also have other African countries that issue diaspora bonds, such as Morocco, Senegal, Namibia, Nigeria, Kenya, Zambia, and Ghana. So that actually brings me to my next slide, which is, I think, the most important point to actually get from this presentation. I call it the challenges or the milestone. And to me, it means the same thing. Based on how you're putting yourself, what kind of achievement that you would like to meet with issuing your first diaspora bond, these elements can become a challenge or they can become a milestone that you're going to actually consider it in issuing your first diaspora. And the first element is actually whether the diaspora it is relevant for your government to issue a diaspora bond. And that is a very important element to consider, because when talking about the pertinence of diaspora bond, you need to ask yourself, what project exactly are you trying to finance? Is the project that you're trying to finance solvable or feasible? And that is very important, because in 2008, when Ethiopia decided to issue their first diaspora bond, it was a complete failure. And why was it a complete failure? Because they could not actually convince the international investors. And they could not convince them because they did not take seriously the feasibility study and the solvability of the project. Therefore, the international investors, they were quite reluctant in investing or in purchasing the Ethiopian bond. So that is why it is very important to consider the pertinence of the issuance of your diaspora bond. Another element you need to consider is the size of your diaspora. Because you have a diaspora living abroad doesn't mean that your diaspora can actually be an important source of external finance. And that is very critical, because talking about your diaspora bond, you are assuming that you're targeting people with a very important source of income. And that is very important to know your diaspora, to know the size, to know how much money they're making, to know the investment pattern of your diaspora. It is also very important to know whether or not your diaspora is financially literate, because at the end of the day, a diaspora bond is a sophisticated financial investment product. So you need to make sure that the audience you're targeting understand what you're trying to sell to them. Another important challenge or milestone to consider is the structure of the diaspora bond. The structure simply refers to whether or not you would like to have a fixed interest rate or a floating interest rate. It is also important to consider whether you would like to register your diaspora bond with the XCC, because like I said, it's registering your diaspora bond with the XCC in the United States and in the USA will actually give you the opportunity to tap into the retail investor market, which in some points can be very handy and very useful to raising external finance. So this is very important to also consider. We need to consider also the cost of sending money in African countries. Unfortunately, as you can see in the figure that I'm sharing with you right now, the cost of sending money via MTO, money transfer operator system, is actually the highest in the world. As you can see, Sub-Saharan Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa, to send money is going to pay 9.1%, as opposed to other part of the continent or other part of the world where actually that transaction cost can be as low as 4%. And this, according to the World Bank latest figures, that actually represents a loss of investment to up to $5 billion a year, which means that African diaspora is actually paying too much to send money back home. And if you want to use diaspora bond as an innovative investment product to help address or to answer the issue of accessing long-term capital, it is very critical to look also at the transaction cost of sending money from overseas back to Africa. And the last challenge, which is the most important and the most relevant based on the current situation in which we are all living, is COVID-19. Why is COVID-19 a challenge or a milestone to consider when issuing your first diaspora bond? Well, the whole idea of diaspora bond is based on one assumption. The assumption of having an African diaspora with access to jobs or with access to finance. We are assuming that the diaspora or the African diaspora living overseas have a formal source of income, or they have an informal source of income. But unfortunately, based on the COVID-19 situation, we've seen a lot of challenges in the labor market in both developing countries and developed countries. Therefore, it is very important now to be considerate of the size of the diaspora, and to be also considerate of the impact of COVID-19 amongst the African diaspora. How many immigrants have actually lost their job? How many business owned by African immigrants have been able to shut down? These are elements that we need to consider because COVID-19 is a reality. COVID-19 is currently happening and completely disrupting the economic system. Finally, a few recommendations for diaspora bond issuers in Africa. The first recommendation that I could make is actually to develop the nation bound and the financial interest aspect of the diaspora bond. And the nation bound is just a synonym for patriotism. And you need to understand that the diaspora bond is actually a continuum between an aid and an investment, which means that for diaspora bond to be a complete success, you need to structure it as an aid, but also structure it as an investment offer or an investment project. Therefore, for government, African government, or for state-owned company, or even the private sector, who thinks that because of patriotism, they're going to be able to raise external financing, hard currency, they might actually meet a complete failure when issuing the first diaspora, because it is very important to also present your diaspora bond as an investment opportunity and not just focus on the patriotism link that you want to actually bring to the fore. Another recommendation that I would like to make that is very important to consider the PES stability. And what I call the PES stability is simply political, economic, and social stability. To actually be able to trade or to sell your diaspora bond at international market or among your diaspora, you need to make sure that you have a good international perception of your government, even a good national perception of the government, because the core sources of success of every financial investment or every financial product is called trust. If you can actually build a trust between a buyer and a seller, you've already made 80% of success. Therefore, it's very important to work on the political and economic and social stability in your country to be able to actually reassure the African or the diaspora that you're targeting that you're going to be able to recoup the investment. Another element, very important, is the debt servicing in local currency. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, we've seen that the currency depreciation risk has increased. And this is something that is very detrimental to a lot of African economies because unfortunately we do not have hard currency, we do not have strong currency. Most of African currencies are actually pegged to the euro or dollar. Therefore, it's very important in structuring your diaspora bond to be mindful of considering including a clause that will allow you to service your debt in local currency. And the last point that I wanted to share in terms of recommendation is the need to learn from past African successes in issuing diaspora bonds. It is very important to learn from past African successes, but also past African failures, even to also include international expertise. Because for a first-time diaspora bond issuer, it is very important to know what went actually right and what went actually wrong. And the whole idea of actually learning from other experiences or learning from other stakeholders is to actually operate a perspective shift. It is very important to operate a perspective shift because we need to depart from that mindset of copying and paste. In Africa, we should stop copying and paste or replicate models just because they've been working in another continent. We need to adapt a new perspective shift that I call the copy and adapt. It is very important to copy and adapt because what actually works in Senegal might not be working in Cote d'Ivoire or in South Africa. Therefore, it is very important to learn from past African experience and adapt them based on the current macroeconomic context in our respective governments. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Can you just please mute your mic, Jean-Philippe? Thank you very much. Bokarsi, the managing director of the Housing Bank of Senegal, is behind with us, and I was thinking actually starting with you because Jean-Philippe mentioned very interesting point on his when he was giving us a bit of an overview of Diaspora, how Diaspora bonds are being structured and being issued, and how they can be used to finance the affordable housing sector. And understanding the economic and financial situation of your diaspora was a key point. And I know that is something that the Housing Bank of Senegal worked a lot on when thinking about thinking when you prepared your issuance, and also the how whether or not they are financial investor savvy or is their first time investing in a financial instrument. Those are considerations to take into account. So can you share with us your experience working issuing a Diaspora bond to finance the housing sector? The bank that you are presiding, the Housing Bank of Senegal, focus only, of course, as its name mentioned, on providing mortgages. So for you, it was really the end game, right? The objective of this issuance. So can you tell us a bit about how you go about it and prepared it and then issued it, and how the lesson learned from it?
Merci beaucoup, Olivier. Je vais peut-être... vous m'entendez?
Oui, très bien, merci.
Voilà. Vous allez jouer au traducteur parce que mon anglais n'est pas...
Aucun problème. Bokarsi will make his presentation in French. For the we have a lot of francophone speakers in the participant. Please ask your question in French. Aucun problème, monsieur Si, faites en français, il n'y a pas de problème.
Voilà, désolé, hein, j'ai reçu l'invitation tardivement, donc je n'ai pas prévu une présentation, mais je vais juste partager avec vous l'expérience de Diaspora Bond que nous avons eu à lancer en 2019 et qui pour une première a été un succès parce que c'était quand même méconnu pour nous du monde francophone et ce n'était pas dans notre système de mobilisation de ressources pour faire face au financement de l'immobilier. Je ne sais pas si je dois m'arrêter pour te permettre de traduire au fur et à mesure ou pas.
Je traduirai un peu plus tard.
Voilà, donc je disais que jusqu'ici, la BHS avait pour habitude, depuis 40 ans qu'on existe, de mobiliser l'épargne des particuliers pour financer le logement en deux phases. Financer les promoteurs qui sont du côté de l'offre de logement et financer les acquéreurs désireux d'acheter les logements produits par les promoteurs. On a profité de la décision de la conférence des ministres de l'UEMOA de mieux structurer l'épargne de la diaspora pour servir de cobaye, puisque ce n'était pas un projet BHS, c'est la BRM qui a fait le tour des États pour les amener à commencer à structurer l'épargne de la diaspora vers des projets d'investissement. Donc, une fois arrivés au Sénégal, on les a orientés vers la banque, tout simplement parce que dans la composition des clients de la banque, j'ai le tiers des clients de la banque qui sont à l'extérieur, mais qui procurent les 2 tiers de nos ressources. Donc, c'est quand même une clientèle qui épargne beaucoup dans l'optique d'attendre des projets immobiliers dans lesquels ils vont acquérir un logement. Il faut savoir également que les Sénégalais sont des naturels voyageurs et en général, leur première préoccupation, c'est d'avoir une maison avant de rentrer. Donc, nous avons voulu tenter cette expérience en lançant les Diaspora Bonds pour mobiliser un peu l'épargne de la diaspora. Donc, on est allé avec une première expérience de 20 milliards parce qu'on n'avait pas d'expérience, on ne pouvait pas se permettre de demander plus que ça au marché. On a fait un roadshow avec les autorités de la BRBM. On a essayé d'expliquer aux compatriotes ce que c'est. C'était assez difficile parce que la plupart d'entre eux n'étaient même pas bancarisés avant de quitter le pays parce que c'est des agents du secteur informel. On leur a expliqué que l'objectif, c'était de placer de l'argent, d'être rémunéré à un taux assez attractif de 6,25 et derrière, de pouvoir s'inscrire dans les programmes de logement que la banque finançait. Et le moment venu, l'épargne accumulée devrait servir à constituer un des éléments de leur plan de financement. Donc, nous avons pu également intéresser certains institutionnels. Le critère qui était retenu, c'est qu'il fallait que l'activité se passe dans un pays de la diaspora sénégalaise et ça a été ouvert également aux diasporas ouest-africaines. Nous avons considéré l'UEMOA comme étant une place bancaire unique parce qu'il y a des compatriotes sénégalais et ivoiriens et togolais qui ont souscrit tout simplement parce que la BHS étant présente à New York depuis 1992 et à Paris, les diasporas burkinabés, ivoiriennes et maliennes passaient par la Banque de l'Habitat, par la filiale new-yorkaise de la BHS pour opérer des transferts. Donc on avait déjà des relations de correspondance. À l'arrivée, on a eu une sursouscription à hauteur de 114%, mais on a préféré garder les 20 milliards qu'on cherchait. Dans les 20 milliards également, la destination, puisque c'était des obligations à 5 ans, l'objectif c'était de financer l'offre de logement dans les pôles urbains. Le président de la République avait lancé en 2012 un programme de développement de logements sociaux dans les pôles urbains de Diamniadio. Pour qui connaissait un peu Dakar, c'est dans la zone qui est autour du nouvel aéroport. Donc, nous y avons accompagné 5 promoteurs qui sont en train de réaliser 10 000 logements à peu près. Et l'objectif, c'était de mobiliser des ressources pour faire face à ces financements parce que c'est quand même un accroissement de nos interventions classiques. Et l'objectif a été atteint puisque sur les 50 milliards que nous avons mis à la disposition de ces promoteurs, les 20 milliards viennent de l'opération Diaspora et le reste, c'est nos ressources propres d'épargne. Donc,
je vais traduire cette partie-là pour commencer. Merci, Monsieur Si. So, Bokarsi was explaining that I'm translating for the Anglophone participant that so they indeed, as Jean-Philippe mentioned, they started by looking first at how the diaspora was structured, and the current customer of the housing bank of Senegal were two-thirds of them were already member of the diaspora. But most of them were not financially included. So you had to go on the roadshow to explain how the financial instrument works and explain how it will be utilized. They started with a small insurance of 20 billion CFA francs, which is $30 million, which was oversubscribed, but it was also open to members of the diaspora who are not like the wider diaspora, so the West African diaspora, not just the Senegalese diaspora. What helped also, in addition to the roadshow they conducted with the West African Capital Market Authority, it was also the fact that they had a physical presence in key diaspora hubs, meaning New York and Paris. So that helped also because there was the diaspora knew the institution. Secondly, the money, the bond was subscribed, it was used directly to finance housing projects run with the government, so in urban area, in cities, and 100% of the fund that was the money that the capital that was raised was used to build affordable houses in those urban areas. Monsieur Sis, si ça vous dérange pas, avant de continuer, je vais passer la parole à Kehinde.
D'accord.
Est-ce que vous pouvez mettre votre micro en mute, s'il vous plaît? Kehinde Ongudimu, thank you so much for joining us. Kehinde is the managing director of the Nigeria Mortgage Refinance Company, so a key and critical actor in the Nigeria housing finance sector. Kehinde, can you tell us a little bit? Can you react a little bit to the discussion, the presentation, and tell us? We know you are thinking of tapping into the capital available in the diaspora to raise long-term capital. So can you tell us a little bit, where is your thinking? What do you think? What do you see as opportunities or challenges?
Thank you very much, and I thank Jean-Philippe for his presentation. I believe he touched on most of the issues, especially talking about the successful ones done by the Israelis and the Indians, and then the not so successful one with the bond issuance by the Ethiopians. I think one thing he omitted was a very successful one done by the Nigerian government, which was 138% oversubscribed. So the Nigerian government issued it. So it's the best so far that we have done in Africa, and it was because a lot of thought was put into the planning and execution and just a lot of work. Normally issuing bonds of this nature, because a complex bond involves a lot of planning, so you need to plan, and it's not just something you do at random. You have to have a very good understanding of the customers or the investors that you are targeting. You want to know where they live, their income level, and so many things that Jean-Philippe mentioned in his presentation. So Nigeria has a good example, and if you look at our remittance, if you look at the African remittance in 2016, it was about the whole of Africa was about $60 billion, and of that, about 18 billion, which has been growing, was to Nigeria. So Nigeria has a potential because we have a lot of diasporans outside of the continent that are sending money home in terms of remittances. But they see remittances sometimes as an expenses, just like an annual expenditure, not as something to save for. So one of the things that we have been championing at NMRC is not to issue a bond itself now, diaspora bond, how we can get diasporans to take local currency loans, so that they take out mortgages in local currency in Nigeria. For instance, we went on a roadshow in the US and Canada, and we're encouraging the US and the UK, and we're encouraging Nigerians there to buy homes. They will buy the homes in Naira. Everything will be in Naira, but they will be paying monthly from their remittances, which is another way of looking at how we can do this. The advantage of that is that because the local currency or the interest rate and everything is fixed and the house price is fixed, and because if you look at history, although sometimes past performance is no guarantee of the future, one of the things we are selling to them is that there's the chances of the Naira appreciating is smaller than it depreciating. So if I were to buy a house now, for instance, in Lagos, take out a mortgage for 20 million Naira, the local currency, and I'm paying in US dollars every month, getting the remittances in. If the Naira falls in value, the burden on the mortgagor in the US becomes lower. So maybe he needs to start sending maybe $500 every month as loan payment. If the Naira falls in value, he then needs to spend maybe 400. So we thought that to them, it should be a good proposition. In fact, that you are getting the house where you're paying the currency that is most likely going to be appreciating, so that net, you'll be paying something lower. We have developed an underwriting standard because we want it to be uniform within Nigeria for such mortgages so that it can become something available. But the challenge we have is just the repatriation. How do you get the money in, on a monthly basis and consistently? One of the challenges we also have in Nigeria is that, if you take money through the official system, I'll give you an example. You get an exchange rate of about 380 Naira to $1. But if it goes through the parallel market, you get 460. So there's a very wide gap between the official exchange rate and the parallel market, so that you're now wondering, you want the people to get as much benefit as possible, So one of the things that the government will do for us is to narrow that gap, or to give these as concessions to Nigerians that are in diaspora, that when they bring in their funds, they will get something close to the parallel market, since that will be more favorable to them. The benefit is a lot for both parties, in the sense that they are not only buying houses here, they are helping to create an employment in Nigeria as more people get engaged in home construction, purchase of assets and things like that, which housing itself will bring to them. And they also have some kind of belonging, that they have an investment. One of the other things that we're also thinking of is that if we are going to do anything, even on the bond side, so that's on the mortgage side, that as we have to look at the structure of the bond, So one would expect that for it to work effectively, because if you look at the remittances that are done in Nigeria, we will be looking at a structure that will be dual currency, such that the bond itself, the principal will be in dollars or in any foreign currency, but the interest element should be something that is local currency, so that way you are mitigating the effect of exchange risk on the issuer, but you are also helping those. So let's say I'm a Nigerian friend in the US and I invest in that kind of a bond. I can then be using the coupon that is maybe quarterly to help my families here, instead of sending remittances monthly, you understand, because there's a stream of coupon payments that will be in local currency that can be directed to meet other things that I will have been sending money for remittances. So I think it's for in Nigeria, if this were for us to do a bond, a diaspora bond, something like that, dual currency bond will also help, because it will meet just not the investment needs of the investor itself, but it will also meet the needs of the local families here, who will be getting some form of income from the coupon payments that will be coming on that. So it's something that we'll look at. But as John Philip said, this is something that is going to take some time for you to, it takes a few years for it to perfect, but we need a lot of data, it's a data intensive thing. Where are these Nigerians? What's their income level? What are their families? Which generation are they? The more generation gets removed from the first generation of migrants, the farther you are removed from that, the less likely they are to invest because of the patriotic discount or the patriotic effect. They begin to see it more as a financial transaction to them. So like my children now will not care so much as to invest in Nigeria as I will care because I am Nigerian, I was born here and things like that. They will just look at it as a financial transaction. What's the difference between investing here and investing in other climates? So we need a lot of data to know who are these Nigerians, what are the kind of structures that we need to put in place that will meet their needs and also meet the needs of Nigerians here. I have a few other things to say, but I will just stop here. So we're working on the mortgage side at first, and then we'll look at the bond side. But the good thing is that because the government of Nigeria has done a very successful one, we have something to price off, And if you look at when Nigerian government issued its for the bond in 2017, it traded at almost about 200 basis points lower than the Euro bonds that were issued in the same year by the Nigerian government. So that means there's an element of patriotic discount associated with these, which makes it cheaper and more affordable for housing and things like that. So I'll stop here for now, and happy to ask to go forward later. Olivier?
Have we lost Olivier?
I think we have.
Lost Olivier.
Oh, he's back now.
Jean-Philippe, shall I?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I was sorry for the technical glitch. This is the issue of remote and live online conference. And thank you so much, Kehinde. We'll come back. I will just before I hand over to Simon, I just want to remind the participant that they can write their session on the chat directly. I know that some have been engaging directly with the speaker, but you can write on the general chat section, and I will read the question to the speakers. Simon is for those of you who don't know him, is the lead housing finance specialist at the World Bank. And thank you so much for joining us. Can you react a little bit to what has been discussed and share a bit your perspective, please?
Sure, of course. It's a fascinating discussion, and thank you very much, Jean-Philippe, for the excellent presentation. I'm really glad that it's something you're looking into. Honestly, it's something I don't know much about. It's not an area we've necessarily worked on. So I've just got a few thoughts. And I think a lot of the points that Kenny and Bokasi mentioned are kind of excellent and fall within some of the areas I was thinking of also. I think the first point is that I think any diversification of funding for housing is a good thing. I think there's a shortage of long-term finance, particularly in Africa. So anything which adds to that has got to be a good thing. And the more you spread the risk away from just having a single reliance, say, on deposits or a single reliance on an MRC or government schemes, it's a good thing. It spreads the risk, and you've got different kind of sources funding what is a need that is kind of a long way from being met at the moment. Second point is that just raising money on its own isn't enough. You've got to think what you're going to do with it. So I think, and I think Kenny was coming on to this a bit, of whether you use that money for mortgages, whether you're using it for construction or for infrastructure. And my point is, you've got to have that engine for housing development working and finely tuned and efficient, because otherwise just putting fuel in a broken engine isn't going to make you go forward. So there has to be a clear purpose of where the money is going to be used and how it's going to be invested. My third point, and this is kind of reacting a bit, and this is kind of where I think research would be useful, reacting a bit to some of Jean-Philippe's points. I take slight issue about the reliability of remittances. I think you had a nice graph of the numbers going up. I think that the COVID this year in particular has put a big dent in remittances. So although it is a source, it may not necessarily be the most kind of reliable. I think there's also, I think Kenny's point mentioning that remittances are seen as an expense, which I think is very true. And it's something that when you're a diaspora, you do it for the first few years, but as the expense is kind of always there, it gradually becomes less and less important. And it's certainly not a second generation thing. It's a first generation immigrants will pay it. Their children, they make their own lives. So it's not something that's going to last forever and ever. So the reliance on diaspora bond as this big funding source, this big solution, I think it needs to be used almost more as an opportunistic tool where it can be raised. And I think also it will be on a case by case basis. I think you need a very kind of certain criteria of where the population is and concentrated, say in France in many cases, or the US, and be able to kind of raise money directly in a few countries. I think my other kind of thought, and I wish I'd kind of got up even earlier, because the session preceding this would have been very interesting to see the links between the two. And I think, again, this comes back to Kenny's points of thinking of maybe loan products. And I think there may be almost more potential in making that direct bridge between remittances and housing investment. And it could be in loan products, or it could be, say, even in something like investing in affordable housing for rental. I think what I've seen in some countries, and some of you may have joined the AUHF meeting, gosh, I guess it made me 5 or 6 years ago when we had it in Dar es Salaam, and we went to see a housing estate. I think it's called Sunset Beach Development, which was largely invested by Diaspora. And the sad thing about it was beautifully built, beautifully done, but the houses were empty except for a few weeks of every year. And that seems a waste. I mean, it's great for the diaspora. They've got an investment, they've got somewhere to retire to, but it's not doing an awful lot in terms of alleviating the housing situation. So finding kind of uses for remittances or diaspora money, for instance, putting it into rental housing, looking at REITs instruments, for instance, that diaspora can invest in, might be kind of a better use for some of these investments. I think the last point I had, which I think was picked up again, is how you structure these bonds. I was trying to think in my head of some of the risks, and particularly how you might deal with the FX risk. On the one hand, it's a very attractive instrument for raising hard currency. A lot of countries, this is a difficult thing, but it's that you need these foreign currency resources, particularly for housing, to pay for a lot of the imports. But then it also leads to a question of who's taking the currency risk. Are you servicing it in hard currency or local currency? And how do you spread that risk out? How do you structure the bond? So those were my initial thoughts, comments, but happy to go in.
Thank you very much, Simon. I mean, this opens a lot of doors for conversation. I would love to hear from Bokar and Kehinde actually to react on what you said. Bokar Si, I think vous êtes en mute. Allô, Bokar? Je pense que vous êtes en mute. Perhaps let's start with Kehinde. I mean, I think what Simon mentioned is very interesting. Can you react to some of the points, and also I mean, you touched on the mortgage, but also like it's true that the investment, right, the nature of the product that will be financed may or may not, depending on how it's structured, address the issue we are looking at, right? So how to ensure that the money raised, the capital raised, is addressing the affordable housing gap, rather through rental or home ownership.
Thanks, Olivier. I think Simon raised some very good points, which is, any form of any source of funding, any other source is a good thing for housing finance, So the more diverse we have these sources of funding, whether it's from diaspora, whether it's from local bond issuance, whether it's, it's a good thing. So I agree completely with that. And just as Simon was talking about, that we should not just be looking at it, just from maybe home ownership only, but even maybe rental things and things like that. It just occurred to me that, maybe one of the very beautiful products that could come up from this can be even student housing, rental housing, We're doing student housing, and all the diasporans, like myself, maybe I'm in the US, and then maybe my university in Nigeria is saying they want to build some houses. I'll be interested as an alumni to invest in that, and to say, okay, yes, we can build this, we can do that. So we should look at the entire gamut, not just home ownership, but rental, short stay and things like that, hospitality, even things for in the medical section, in the medical side, I think the broader we think about the scope, enlarge the scope, the more we'll be able to attract more people to invest in these. So yeah, I fully support looking at broader things, not just pure home ownership. So that's my response for that.
Thank you very much, Kehinde. I will try again with Mr. C to see if he has been able to come back online. Bokar, can you hear us? Je pense que vous êtes en... Ah. Bien, welcome back. Oui, est-ce que vous nous entendez bien?
Oui, je vous entends bien.
Super. Je voulais un peu voir si vous pouvez réagir à ce que Simon a dit, et ce que Kehinde a dit sur... Vous avez beaucoup d'expérience, vous, sur la nature des projets qui sont financés avec les émissions obligataires que vous avez faites. Vous nous parlez un peu plus en détail, vous avez commencé à nous parler de comment les fonds l'argent avait été utilisé pour financer des projets dans des logements urbains. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous en dire un peu plus? Et aussi sur comment vous voyez les flux de transfert de fonds des migrants évoluer maintenant avec la situation du Covid?
OK, merci beaucoup. C'est-à-dire que la banque, depuis sa création, a essayé de se positionner sur la chaîne de financement global, c'est-à-dire que financer l'offre de logement de la part des développeurs et des coopératives d'habitat, parce que le mouvement coopératif également est assez développé, et financer les acquéreurs des logements réalisés dans les projets. Ce qui fait que les financements destinés aux promoteurs c'est dénoué avec les crédits acquéreurs accordés aux particuliers qui achètent les 10 projets. De ce fait, la durée des financements mis en place au bénéfice des développeurs, c'est la durée de réalisation des projets. On essaie d'avoir des projets qui se réalisent par tranche de logement sur des durées pouvant aller de 18 à 36 mois. Ça permet de mobiliser des ressources sur le marché ou de mobiliser des ressources comme la diaspora. Il faut savoir également qu'on a, à la création de la banque, le seul compte d'entrée en relation, c'était le compte d'épargne. Donc, on avait énormément de ressources dans les comptes d'épargne, qui fait qu'on était même acteur du marché en termes d'achat de titres auprès de la BOAD, de souscription à des obligations. L'obligation de l'AFD, on avait souscrit d'ailleurs et qui nous avait rétrocédé une partie en CFA pour nous permettre d'accompagner les projets. Derrière, on finance les acquéreurs et ça se passe bien jusqu'ici. En 2012, il y a eu le programme donc des pôles urbains qui ambitionnait de réaliser 50 000 logements en 5 ans. Il faut savoir qu'aujourd'hui, on était à des productions de 5 000 logements par an. Quand on réalisait 50 000 en 5 ans, ça signifie qu'il faut passer à au moins 10 000 par an. 10 000 par an, c'est multiplié par 2 les besoins de financement de la banque en termes de crédit acquéreur. Qui fait qu'on a été obligé d'aller sur le marché, de lancer cette opération Diaspora Bond, de lever des fonds au niveau de la BOAD, au niveau de la BIDC et même au niveau de la CRH en termes de financement hypothécaire. Parce que derrière, ce qu'il faut dire, la BHS, à elle seule, a quasiment 40% des encours immobiliers de l'UEMOA et 60% des encours immobiliers du Sénégal au niveau privé. Donc ça vous montre une idée du rôle de la banque. Maintenant, l'expérience Covid, ce qu'on a noté, et c'est ça peut-être, on va observer une baisse de nos ressources, tout simplement parce que nos compatriotes qui résident en Italie, aux États-Unis et en France, qui sont des pays impactés par la pandémie, certains 3 ou 4 boulots, dont un des boulots est envoyer de l'argent pour épargner. Donc, on note une désépargne lié parfois même à un désir d'avoir une mise à disposition à l'envers pour payer certaines dépenses urgentes. Le mouvement ne s'est pas amplifié. Pour l'instant, on a eu à peu près 5% de réduction des avoirs qu'on recevait, mais il est indéniable que si la pandémie se poursuit, on le sentira, parce que tout simplement, une bonne partie des familles, leurs moyens de subsistance, viennent de l'extérieur par les envois des migrants. Mais jusqu'au 30 septembre, on n'avait pas noté, c'est les derniers chiffres disponibles, on n'avait pas noté une baisse globale des ressources de la banque. Maintenant, il faut qu'on fasse une analyse fine pour voir dans cette baisse de ressources, quelle est la part des ressources locales ou la part des ressources venant des migrants. Mais en tout cas, c'est un vecteur qui est surveillé. Mais comme la pandémie a démarré également au Sénégal au mois d'avril, au mois de septembre, on est à 5 mois de pandémie. Je pense qu'à la fin de l'année, on verra exactement, parce qu'on sera à 8 mois de pandémie, on pourra avoir une base comparative, tout simplement parce que ce qu'on a noté par contre, qui peut expliquer qu'il n'y ait pas eu beaucoup de baisse, en général, ils venaient une fois au pays assister à certaines fêtes religieuses assez remarquables. Vous avez la Tabaski et la Korité, donc la fête de rupture du jeûne, et il y avait également les cérémonies religieuses comme le Magal de Touba. Cette année, ils ne sont pas venus parce que les aéroports étaient fermés. Donc, du coup, les dépenses qu'ils exposaient pour venir en vacances, c'est peut-être ça qui fait qu'ils n'ont pas désépargné un peu. Parce qu'avant, ils venaient, ils restaient un mois, ils consommaient un peu une partie de l'épargne et ils dépensaient également le tarif de l'avion et les cadeaux achetés. Comme ils ne sont pas venus, je considère que ça a dû jouer positivement sur les postes de charge. Mais on va faire une étude comparative à fin décembre pour regarder l'impact réel. Mais on surveille le phénomène du Covid parce que nous, en plus, c'est 2/3 de nos ressources d'épargne.
Merci beaucoup, c'est très très intéressant. Je vais traduire pour les participants anglophones, mais merci beaucoup, Monsieur Si. There's a very interesting point. Mr. Si is reacting to the comment made by Simon and Kehinde on the impact of COVID, right? And because the Housing Bank of Senegal, so for those of you who don't know, is the biggest mortgage provider in WAEMU countries. It's 40% of the mortgage issued in WAEMU and 60% of the refinancing, the request for refinancing at the Regional Mortgage Liquidity Facility, the CRH, WAEMU. So, and 2/3 of their resources are coming from the diaspora. So obviously they are monitoring very closely because most of the Senegalese diaspora is living in countries in countries that have been in Europe and America that have been severely impacted by the COVID-19 economic crisis and health crisis, of course. So they are monitoring. As of September 30, they have not seen a real impact on their resources. Mostly are the savings, of course, deposit and savings. But they fear, of course, they are monitoring it very seriously because they fear it will. If the crisis continue longer, it will start to have a serious impact on their balance sheet. At the same time, expenses have also decreased, which is also a very interesting point because fixed, what we can call fixed expenses throughout the year in terms like for religious celebration and all the events that are fixed in the calendar have not happened because of the incapacity to travel, because of the confinement. So so they have not really tapped yet into their savings. So the money is still available. So this is very interesting, something to monitor. This is also the risk when you open your balance sheet to the diaspora, that you increase the capacity to raise capital, but you are obviously more subject to external risk factors. In terms of the financing for developers, they go on the market to raise capital for the financing for developers, 1 to 3 years financing, and they also finance on their own resource, of course, and also provide. So they provide, of course, end user finance, and they use the mortgage liquidity facility to refinance. So very interesting model, you tapping into the diaspora, and I think I see that we're running out of time. So I don't know if Kehinde or Simon, you want to last few words for the session, and I will in the meantime read the comment to see if there's a question for you. Kehinde, do you want to start?
Thank you. So again, as I said, we see diaspora as a veritable source of finance to housing in Nigeria, whether it's through mortgages, whether it's through investment in funds that will fund infrastructure and all of that. but we see them as a major source, especially when you look at the level of remittances that we have in Nigeria, which is in the billions, 20 billion, over 20 billion, and all of that. So we'll continue to work on products that will meet their needs and also attract their investments into the country, making sure they get something that is reasonable, even though they might, in the process, give us some patriotic discounts, but they will still they'll still get something that will be favorable to them as well. So we'll continue to work on products in Nigeria to meet their needs. And thank you for the big consumption here.
Thank you so much, Kehinde. Simon, the last words are for you.
Not much to add, really. I think it's an interesting. I'm all for different and varied solutions. So I don't think that this falls in that category. I think coming back to my point of it's not just about raising money; it's what you do with that money that's important. And so having that clear linkage between what the money is raised for and the outputs, and it can go beyond just home ownership. And I think Kenny, just off the top of his head, came up with some excellent ideas of student housing or housing linked to medical facilities or something like that. I think that those are excellent ideas, and I think is maybe a way of really kind of leveraging that patriotic discount and that you get with Diaspora bonds.
Excellent, thank you so much. So Jean-Philippe, we now have a lot of very valid, interesting input for CAF to continue and deepen this research and to take into consideration. I want to thank all the panelists very, very much for joining us for this session. It was very, very fascinating. I encourage the participants to continue the conversation with the panelists either on the networking, through the networking platform or to the chat section or to direct messages. We have now 2 sessions starting immediately. If you go on the session on tab on the left side of the platform, the social impact investment in housing is one, and the other session is the future of blockchain technology in affordable housing in Africa. Thank you very much, and talk to you very soon. Thank you. Merci, Monsieur C. Merci, Simon. Thank you so much, Kehinde.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you, everyone.
Merci.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.